Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's Healing Perspectives lecture brought to you by the Institute for Health and Healing. My name is Dr. Akil Palanisamy. I'm a physician at Sutter's Institute for Health and Healing in Sacramento, and I'll be your moderator today. So a recording of this presentation will be available for replay on our YouTube channel after the event. The link is included in the chat below, and we'll also email you the link as part of our post-event email within the next week, so just look out for that. And before we get started, I want to go over some quick housekeeping to prepare you for our talk today. So this lecture is for informational purposes only. Everyone's health situation is unique, so we ask that you seek out professional advice for your specific medical needs. And next, we'll quickly review how to use Zoom to ask questions and get technical support from our team. So this will be an interactive lecture. You're not going to be on camera, but we do encourage you to participate in the lecture. So periodically polls will appear on the screen for you to anonymously respond. And the chat is currently disabled, but will be turned on when our speakers ask questions for you to respond to. So look for the chat icon on the bottom bar of your screen. And if you have questions for the speaker or for our team, click the Q&A icon to type your questions. We have a team monitoring your questions, and we'll try to respond to as many of them as time allows at the end of the presentation. And please note your responses are only visible to our team for HIPAA compliance. So to change the view of the slide and presenter, you can adjust the slider between the two screens or select the view option in the top right corner. If you're having a hard time hearing or seeing anything during the talk, please refresh your screen, check your internet settings or connection. And if you need additional help, use the Q&A icon and our team will help you troubleshoot. So remember, you can access a recording of this talk directly after the event using the YouTube link in the chat. Most people learn best by watching and listening to our talks first and then returning to the recording to take notes. To thank you for being here today, we will send you the post-event email, including a resource guide, a copy of this slide deck, and a link to the event recording. And finally, after our talk today, please share your feedback by taking our short survey. Now that we've covered the housekeeping items, I wanted to share more about the Institute for Health and Healing. We offer integrative medicine clinical care, combining the best of conventional medicine with proven healing practices from around the world that serve the whole person. We have integrative medical clinics in San Francisco, San Carlos, Santa Rosa, Roseville, and Sacramento that offer these services listed here. Many of our services are covered by insurance. The Institute for Health and Healing hosts free Healing Perspectives events like today's multiple times a year with top medical practitioners. And we would like to highlight practitioners from our Roseville and Sacramento clinics today. Our talented team of providers sees a wide variety of patients there, and most of our services are covered by insurance. So our teams in both locations include integrative medicine physicians who have previously spent decades practicing in internal medicine, obstetrics and gynecology, family medicine, and they're trained and skilled in integrative and functional medicine. We also have several clinicians with specialties in nutrition, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, psychotherapy, and more. So later in the presentation, we'll share info on several Sacramento area practitioners who are currently accepting new patients. We would like to thank the Sacramento and Roseville Institute for Health and Healing clinics for sponsoring today's Healing Perspectives talk. The support allows us to share invaluable information with thousands of patients and people in Northern California and beyond. So now it's my privilege to introduce my friend and colleague, today's speaker, Dr. Andy Luckett. So Dr. Luckett is an integrative medicine physician at Sutter's Institute for Health and Healing Clinic in Sacramento, California. And prior to joining IHH, he completed a fellowship focused on underserved communities in Santa Rosa, California. He also cared for under-resourced patients at One Community Health, a federally qualified health center in Sacramento. As their integrative medicine coordinator, he led their Food as Medicine program, including the implementation and study of a produce prescription program for patients with type 2 diabetes, which we'll hear more about today during his talk. So now it is my honor to welcome Dr. Andy Luckett.
Thank you, Akil. I am Dr. Andy Luckett. I'm excited to talk to you about the impact of good nutrition and food access with a little food for thought. To start out, I want you to close your eyes and imagine with me. Imagine the yummiest, healthiest, home-cooked meal you've had in the last week. Is your mouth watering? Now think of what fresh food went into making that meal possible. Where did you get it from? Was it grown in your own garden? Did you buy it at the farmer's market or at your local grocery around the block? Now, imagine how it would feel if you had to choose between paying for that fresh food versus your prescription or your gas to get to work or toilet paper or even new school supplies for your kid. Take a moment, take a breath with me, and really feel in your body the stress that must cause and the worry it would feed. Who I am and why I'm here today. This is my family. I apologize ahead of time if you can hear these two kiddos in the background. They're going to be coming up for nap sometime during our talk today, but they're benign. Anyways, you can read all these notes on the page, but the bottom line is I worked for over 10 years at federally qualified health centers in Northern California with folks who were sick in many different ways because they didn't have the option to choose to eat healthy or they didn't know how. I built programs like the produce prescription program that I'll talk about later with the aim of providing healthy food that could work as well as, if not better than, prescription medicine to my patients who needed it most, but just couldn't afford it. I learned so much about the need to improve food access and integrate nutrition education into healthcare. So what are we going to talk about today? First off, we'll start by discussing what is food insecurity, who is most impacted, and why does it matter? Then we'll look at the cost of food insecurity to us as a society. Then we'll touch on the produce prescription program that I ran and the research we did, and we'll wrap up by discussing how to eat healthy on a budget. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Charles. He struggles with healthy eating and it's affecting his blood sugar. Maybe you can relate. Maybe it's not your blood sugar, but it's your blood pressure, your weight, your indigestion, or your joint pain. We can all relate to Charles in some way. I hear from patients all the time, I eat healthy, and yet their diet-related chronic diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure and cholesterol, overweight and obesity, heart attacks and strokes persist. Charles has had diabetes for over 10 years, so this is not something new for him. But what sets Charles apart from many is that on some level, making healthy food choices is often not under his control due to financial and socioeconomic burdens. And despite the advice of his better angels, he's reliant on a diet full of processed foods. And even if he had better access, he never actually learned how to cook those healthy foods. So let's get into it. What is food insecurity? It's a condition experienced by 1 in 10 Americans, like Charles, who, due to their economic and social situation, don't have access to adequate food. Food insecurity can mean your diet has a limited variety and poor quality, but the quantity of food intake isn't actually limited. Or in more severe cases, you could be very food insecure and sometimes have to skip meals or eat less just to get by. We can compare that to a broader epidemic in our country, nutrition insecurity. That's where folks, our neighbors, coworkers, friends, maybe family, maybe it's you, lack consistent access to healthy, affordable foods. Foods that promote health, actually prevent illness, and in cases like Charles, could even treat disease. If you are nutrition insecure, you're not going hungry necessarily, but you just can't afford the nutritious foods your body needs. It's super difficult because, as you probably know, the healthiest, most nutrient-dense foods may often be more expensive than unhealthy food. And that unhealthy food may also have that healthy food, may also have fewer calories. And you need to eat more of it to fill you up, which costs more. So that's compared to foods like those in the picture here that we know are unhealthy. We know they're low in nutrients our body needs, but the truth is they're probably friendlier to the wallet. Because these foods are full of unhealthy, simple, processed carbs, sugars, salts, and fat, they fill you up in a way that maybe a chicken salad can't. When someone is facing food insecurity, it can be a really hard cycle to get out of. First, your budget is strapped and you can't afford to buy healthy foods. So what do? You're a survivor. Next, you figure out how to cope. You make sacrifices to the quality of your diet to buy unhealthy foods to keep from going hungry. You start eating more cheap fast food or microwave dinners because you had to pick up a second shift at work and don't have time to cook. You're eating late when you get home from work and shoveling in your food so you can put your kid or grandkid to bed. What happens next? Is it any surprise that this eventually causes your blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol to go up? You may start getting joint pains, heartburn, or belly cramping after you eat. Then what? Your doctor wants to run some tests and prescribe medicines to help, but that costs money too. And then your illness starts affecting your ability to work, and you lose your job due to missed days or decreased productivity. You put on weight, your back hurts, short of breath, and you can't get around like you used to. And lastly, when that happens, your income goes down further, and you make even more spending trade-offs, cutting out even more of the healthy, more costly foods, and your food insecurity worsens. It's really a vicious cycle. The issue of food and nutrition insecurity is a big deal. We live in America, and of course, we can't force people to eat healthy. I mean, sure, there are plenty of well off people with chronic diet related diseases, but there's a big slice of our population that doesn't even have a chance, doesn't have the opportunity to make those healthy food choices. So, the eventual goal is to accomplish universal nutrition security, where everybody has consistent access to affordable foods and beverages that not only promote well being, but can prevent and even treat disease, as we'll discuss. So, who's the most impacted? In 2020, almost 14 million households were affected. And of those, low income households are almost 3 times more likely to be food insecure as the average household. But there are plenty of people who aren't considered low income, but are food insecure. The highest rates of food insecurity are among racial and ethnic minorities, including Native Americans and Alaskan Natives, African Americans, and Latinos. An African American household is 3 times as likely to be food insecure as a white household, and over 2 times as likely as the average household. Hispanic and Latino households are 70% more likely to be food insecure. And while pooled together, racial and ethnic minorities make up the biggest slice of the food insecure population, as a single social group, single mothers, Black, white, brown, Asian American, it doesn't matter. Single mothers had the highest rates of food insecurity in our country. In my eyes, that's a preventable tragedy. So we talked about preventable diet-related diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure and cholesterol, heart attacks, congestive heart failure, strokes, kidney disease, cirrhosis from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The list goes on. I'd like you to take a guess right now in the poll. How many Americans die each year due to a preventable diet-related disease? Majority are going back and forth between B and C. There's a few A's, a few D's. We'll give it a little while longer for people to get their answers in. The answer is C. 1 million people. die each year from a preventable diet-related disease. That's all diet-related diseases, but what about food insecurity? Why does it matter? How can it affect your health? Food insecurity is linked to all these diseases listed here and more, including dementia, faster cognitive decline, and obesity. But it's important to note things like asthma, COPD, arthritis, cancer, dementia, these diseases are not just caused by an unhealthy diet. So it shows that aside from the fact that food insecurity often leads to poor food choices, this insecurity in and of itself, on its own, increases the risk of those diseases by some other mechanism. And it's important that we not equate food insecurity with being poor. While food insecurity is linked to all 10 of those diseases, low income is actually linked to only 3 of them, which are highlighted here. Other studies have shown, irrespective of socioeconomic status, other health conditions, race, gender, etc., people who are food insecure have higher levels of CRP or C-reactive protein and white blood cell counts, both of which are markers of inflammation in the body. They have a 40% increased risk of any inflammatory condition. We know higher levels of chronic inflammation are linked to autoimmune disease, heart disease, diabetes, multiple cancers, and chronic respiratory diseases. But we're not just talking about older folks. What about the mamas in our community, their pregnancies, and their babies? Food insecure pregnant moms have higher rates of gestational diabetes and anemia, higher rates of prenatal and postpartum depression, increased likelihood of low birth weight infants, and babies with congenital heart defects and cleft palates. As a father of a daughter with congenital heart defect, that breaks my heart. And food insecure diets low in folic acid during pregnancy increase the risk for preterm delivery and defects in the brain and spinal cord development. I get it. I know this is a lot of heavy stuff. So as we discuss this difficult topic, maybe you can think of it like a kid eating their vegetables. They may not like the taste, but you know it's good for them. So please hang with me. It's important. And I promise we'll get to the dessert towards the end of the talk. So now back to the vegetables. What about the kids? Between 2021 and 2022, 4.1 million more children became food insecure, increasing their risk for asthma, eczema, obesity, anemia, depression, and more. They even have a higher chance of getting whatever that bug is going around school. And we are not setting the children in our community up for success. They perform lower in school, have increased absences, tardiness, more suspensions, poor cognitive function. Their moms have a higher likelihood of depression, and that further impacts the child. Altogether, this can result in real issues that will follow them into adulthood, feeling less secure and potentially facing true developmental challenges that could end up being barriers for them the rest of their lives. Trying to get this slide. There we go. And what about our seniors? There were almost 7 million food insecure older folks in 2022. We talked about dementia, but food insecure seniors can have many other health concerns, higher rates of depression, more limitations in their daily activities, and just generally more likely to be sick. So now we've looked at who food insecurity affects. Take a look at the cost of food insecurity. I've talked a lot about health and the impacts on the individual, but what about at a societal level? Approximately 85% of current healthcare dollars are spent on management of preventable diet-related diseases. 85%. That's not all due to food insecurity, I know, but it's a big contributor. Food insecurity adds $53 billion in healthcare costs per year, an average of anywhere between $1,300 and $1,800 per food insecure person. And those families are paying $2,500 more on healthcare than your average family with sufficient food. With that in mind, let's step back, and here's a poll question. What do you think is the average dollar amount per week needed for a food insecure person to become food secure? A, $24.73, B, $38.22, C, $45.38, D, $51.10. I'll give it a little while if people get their answers in here. Leading the way is answer D, $51.10. Got a few A's, not that many. B and C are kind of in the middle. Let's take a look at our responses. The answer, A, $24.73 a week. Now, keep in mind, this is a national average. It may be higher in states like California where the cost of food is higher, but just think that adds up to about $1,286 a year to help someone become food secure. And how much do we say, do you remember, on average is spent on healthcare costs each year on someone suffering from food insecurity? $1,300. Now, I know it's not this simple, and I wasn't a math major, but what if we spent $1,286 feeding these folks healthy food instead of $1,300 paying to take care of their illnesses? The problem is the biggest program in our country to address food insecurity is the SNAP program. In California, we call it CalFresh. Colloquially, they're known as food stamps or EBT. But as you can see here, over 50% of people who are food insecure don't meet the national guidelines to qualify for SNAP food assistance dollars. And while the SNAP program does address food insecurity for many, it doesn't address nutrition insecurity, as families and individuals can spend that money on McDonald's, Taco Bell, Takis, and Coke as easily as they can on strawberries, salmon, and kale. The question is, which option are you choosing if you needed to stretch a buck? So how do we address this? What are some solutions? How do we give people with food and nutrition insecurity the freedom to make healthy food choices? Produce prescription programs are an important option, like the one I led at One Community Health, partnering with research team from Yale School of Public Health and our funder, Wholesome Wave, who's an awesome national nonprofit working to tackle nutrition insecurity in many really creative ways. Other vital resources in this space are medically tailored meals companies like local Sacramento startup Foodum, who I work with while at One Community Health. They accept Medi-Cal and FSA and HSA dollars to provide healthy meals and culinary education from chefs who do the cooking in the comfort of your own kitchen. I also want to give a shout out to all food banks, including our local all-star here, Sacramento Food Bank, who I also worked with while at One Community Health. They do some amazing work there, truly. Food banks and additional resources. And I recommend supporting them however you can. So this was a community academic partnership that we put together to research the benefits of produce prescription programs. Remember Charles? He was one of 200 patients in the program. All of our patients had type 2 diabetes, and they received $50 a month for 8 months, loaded onto a Walmart gift card each month that would only be able to spend on fresh produce and fresh vegetables and fruits. We measured their hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of like average blood sugar. We measured their blood pressure, their body mass index, which is average measure of healthy weight, and their cholesterol and lipids over the course of the program. And interestingly, only 63% of patients who participated were enrolled in CalFresh. Again, a sign that SNAP assistance is not meeting the needs of all of our food insecure population. So how did the participants spend their money? Only 4.2% did not spend any of their benefits, and 31% spent all of it, only $400. And we noted, not surprisingly, those participants who had children in their family redeemed more of the benefits. Why, might you ask, would someone struggling with food insecurity not spend every single dollar given to them for free to get more healthy food? Well, there were a lot of reasons, and our study wasn't perfect. Many participants didn't live near a Walmart, and many lacked consistent transportation to get to Walmart. And some noted that their closest Walmart didn't even really carry quality produce. And because this program took place during the pandemic, many participants were wary of leaving their home to go to a big grocery and risk exposure to infection. One barrier I didn't mention is that often our patients, like Charles, just didn't know how to eat healthy. Many of them were working with our registered dietitians during this program, learning about eating healthy and healthy shopping habits. We taught them about reading food labels and making healthier food choices. So, if you're comparing foods like two different bags of popcorn, look at the serving size and the calories. Bag one may say it has less calories, fat, sodium, added sugars, but when you compare the serving size, you realize it's half of the serving size listed on bag two. Double the serving size and you'll double the calories and other nutrients too. And you want to shoot for less than 5% of the daily values per serving of sodium, saturated fat, and added sugars. A lot of people in America worry about protein. And the honest truth is, unless you're trying to bulk up and put on a lot of muscle, you're probably getting enough protein in your diet. Nevertheless, it's so super important. It's a great brain food. It can boost and sustain energy and help lower insulin levels. If you're doing the math, a good goal is to aim for a little more than 1/3 of a gram per pound of weight each day in protein. And we know it's always healthy to include a good balance between plant sources of protein like lentils, beans, nuts, seeds, tofu, tempeh, and animal sources like fish, seafood, meat, and dairy. For vitamins and minerals, if you're looking at the nutrition facts, know that foods with 20% or more are considered to have a high percent daily value. Now, fiber. Fiber has so many positive health benefits. It helps digestion by feeding a healthy microbiome. It helps lower cholesterol. It can keep blood sugars from spiking. You can get a lot of fiber from whole grains like brown rice, oats, quinoa, and corn, and definitely vegetables. Lots and lots of vegetables. And fruits and legumes like beans and garbanzos are high in fiber, as well as lentils. Fiber is different than starch, though. Starchy foods are those that are higher in carbs and calories, but they provide energy for us. They can potentially raise blood sugar more than those non-starchy foods, which are lower in carbs and calories, making them better for weight management and blood sugar control. Now, both kinds are nutritious, but they serve different roles in a balanced diet. So when we are talking about produce and healthy diet, not all vegetables are created equal. There are starchy vegetables, like those on the left, that I would recommend limiting my servings to maybe 4 to 6 a week if you're counting them as one of your vegetables and not a carb, versus non-starchy vegetables, like those on the right, that we should all try to eat 4 to 6 servings a day. And when you're shopping for vegetables and fruits, you don't always have to choose organic because that can get pricey. Here's a list of the Clean 15. Those are the 15 vegetables and fruits with the lowest pesticide, herbicide, fungicide levels, and the Dirty Dozen, which are the 12 foods with the highest levels. This list is put together by Environmental Working Group, ewg.org. Check them out. Lots of great information. And if you Google Dirty Dozen vegetables, it'll come right up and tell you all the ones that are also in between the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, too. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize this list. We'll include it in your resource packet. Now, the two main things when I'm comparing a food's carbohydrate content is number one, how much fiber does it have? And number two, how much added sugar does it have? As I mentioned, you want less than 5% of the daily value in added sugar per serving. And 4 grams of sugar is equal to 1 tablespoon. I like to keep that in my head when I'm looking at those grams to give me a real concrete idea of how much sugar is in a food. A food is considered high in fiber, however, if it has 5 grams or more per serving. Now, what is an added sugar? It's something that's been added in to make the food sweeter. It not only includes fructose, corn syrup, cane sugar, brown sugar, honey, molasses, which you may have heard of, but even fruit juice concentrate is actually just a way to add sugar. And look at the ingredients. All of those words ending in OSE, ose, like maltose, fructose, glucose, galactose, lactose, sucrose, they're all just added sugars. You may have heard of the glycemic index, which measures a food's impact on blood sugar. This is something that we had to teach our program participants about who had diabetes. Both glycemic index and glycemic load are ways of telling how much and how fast a food causes your blood sugar to rise. I personally tend to focus more on glycemic load because it takes into account how much sugar is actually in a serving size of a specific food. For example, a Snickers has a lower glycemic index than watermelon. But who is going to argue with me that Snickers are a healthier choice for a diabetic than watermelon? That's why it's important to look at glycemic load. The candy bar has a very high glycemic load at 25, versus watermelons is very low at 5. Why? Because the total amount of sugar in a serving of watermelon is actually quite low compared to the amount in a Snickers. You have to eat 5 servings of watermelon to equal the amount of sugar in just one Snickers. So really consider thinking about looking at a food's glycemic load. Here's a chart with different foods comparing their glycemic index and glycemic load. The takeaway here, the closer you can shoot to the upper left of this chart and at least the top row with low glycemic load foods, the healthier your blood sugar will be. Interestingly, your cooking method can actually change the glycemic values of foods. You may have heard of this. These are all different glycemic values of different kinds of potatoes. On the lower end on the left, you've got boiled potatoes that then you put in the refrigerator overnight before eating them the next day. The middle has roasted or microwave baked potatoes and French fries. And the far right are the instant mashed potato flakes in the box. So aside from wanting to avoid the processed potato flakes, right? What do we learn from this? The important thing for me, you heard that right. If you boil your potatoes the night before and put them in the fridge to eat or reheat the next day, they're actually much healthier, which is great news for me because I love potato salad and I love leftovers. Now, quickly, it's not all just about the carbs and the blood sugar. A small French fry and roasted fresh potatoes have similar glycemic indexes, and a serving of fries even maybe has a little more fiber and less sugar. But obviously, I'm going to recommend the roasted potatoes, which have lower fat used for cooking and are an unprocessed whole food compared to the fries, obviously, which are very processed. The roasted potato wins every time. So here's a guide for how much food you need to eat to get 1 serving of a fruit or a vegetable, with the goal for the day of 4 fruit servings and 5 vegetable servings. Take a quick look at this, get an idea of these different values before we move on. And remember, this will be in your resource guide. Now let's pause and do a poll. I want to know from you, how many servings of vegetables and fruits did you eat in the last 24 hours? And feel free to put your answer in the chat. All right, interesting. A lot of 4s, 2s, 6s, 5, 7. A lot of 2s, 3s, 8, 9. Wow, good job for some of you. All right, we'll go ahead and pause it there. 8 to 10. Whoa, look at that. Fantastic. Anyways, interestingly, when we looked at our produce prescription program participants, we found that their fruit intake more than doubled and their vegetable intake went up by 50%. And that's with just $50 a month. We also saw that patients felt healthier just by being a part of the program, with a reduction in those who rated their health as poor or fair, and an increase in those who rated it as good, very good, or excellent. The coolest thing for me, and we didn't include a chart of this, unfortunately, is that food was actually as good as medicine. Their hemoglobin A1Cs, which again are a measure of average blood sugar, their A1C went down by nearly the same amount as it would with some of the most common diabetes medicines like metformin or glipizide. Again, we were only giving people $50 a month, which is half of the roughly $100 a month a food insecure person needs to become food secure. And yet, 23% of participants experience an improvement in food security status. So I was really happy with the outcomes of this program. Next, we're going to hear from one of our participants. Her name was Joanne. She was interviewed for a piece on NPR's Morning Edition about produce prescription programs.
What happens when healthcare providers prescribe fresh produce to patients with diet-related illness?
$50 each month enabled her to buy her favorite fruits that she normally can't afford.
I love berries, so I mostly would buy berries, strawberries, blueberries, cherries. Being able to buy healthy food, you feel like a millionaire. I did.
The challenge is to maintain these changes over time. Since the produce prescription programs are only temporary, patients need to continue on this path to see if their risk of disease can be reduced.
We need to get to a place where once we've established which patients benefit from these and what the right dose is, we need to get to a place where these are persistent benefits. Same way, if you have high blood pressure and you get put on a medication, you're not going to go off the medication in 6 months. You're going to stay on it.
So unfortunately, we did not receive continued funding for this produce prescription program. Now, right now there is temporary funding for medically supportive food through Medi-Cal, California's Medicaid insurance program, but that bipartisan bill that was signed by 100% of the California State Assembly and Senate, AB 1975, that bill that would have made medically supportive food a permanent Medi-Cal benefit, unfortunately, Governor Newsom just vetoed it in the last week. Now, while for many reasons I won't go into, this bill wouldn't have solved all food insecurity in California, it could be a huge health insurance benefit, providing funding for produce prescription programs like the one we ran, medically tailored meals like those from Foodum, food pharmacies, and produce delivery programs. Hopefully, if our government leadership hears from its citizens, it'll be brought up again next year and included in the budget. As Joanne mentioned, having the freedom and opportunity to eat her favorite berries caused her to feel like a millionaire. I had another patient in the program who told me an amazing story how she just felt so proud of herself that when her grandkids could come over, she could actually offer them a healthy snack. Fruit and vegetables are expensive. Why? USDA reports between 85 and 2000, the retail price of soda rose by 20%, fats and oils by 35%, and sugars and sweets by 46%. That's compared to a 118% increase in the retail price of fresh fruits and vegetables. So again, let's take a step back, and I want to hear from you. We've shown eating well can obviously be expensive. How do you save money and still eat healthy? Again, feel free to put your answers in the chat. I'll call out the ones that are my favorite. Cooking at home, excellent. Buy in bulk. Garden, buy tofu lentils, buy frozen, excellent. Eating less. Canned foods, very cool. Clip coupons. There you go. Grocery outlet. Nice shout out. I'm a fan. All right. So let's talk about it. Here are 12 tips I've put together for eating healthy on a budget. There we go. We won't talk about all of them, but we'll hit the highlights, and the rest will be in your resource packet. Number 1, chef it up. Cook your own food. Americans spent over a third of their food money on eating out in 2022. The price of eating out is going up faster than the cost of eating at home. It's nearly 5 times more expensive to order delivery food than cook at home. Even meal prep services are 3 times more expensive than cooking from scratch when you buy the food at your own grocery. Are you strapped for time to shop? Try a grocery delivery service. It's still more affordable than eating out. And it makes a difference. Look at the price difference here between the restaurant on the left, the meal kit, and the home cooked meal. Thankfully, there is some good news, as you can see on the right here. In recent years, the price of fresh vegetables, fruit, and fish, as well as other seafoods, are not going up nearly as fast as the less healthy options at the top, like fats, oils, sugars, and sweets. This was really exciting for me as I found this out putting this talk together. I know it's a heavy talk, so I gotta shine some light on the positive when it's there. Next step, live life on the edges of the grocery, that is. Generally speaking, many of the healthiest foods are around the outside edges of the grocery. Once you start wandering down the aisles, you're going to run up against a lot less healthy food options, with the exception that canned foods, whole grains like oatmeal, rice, or quinoa, natural nut butters, nuts, and seeds, they can live in the aisles. But if you're going to be brave and venture down the aisle, you better know exactly what you're looking for. Next tip for shopping healthy on a budget, an ounce of prevention. This one's pretty straightforward. Compare your food prices by the ounce. Get out the phone on your calculator if you have to. I do. Just because one box looks big with a low price, it may actually have less food and cost more by the ounce. Next tip, yes, you can. Don't be afraid of eating canned foods or frozen vegetables and fruits for that matter. From vegetables to fish to beans, canned foods are a very affordable, potentially healthy way to stretch a buck. Just be careful to choose the low sodium options. They can be a little pricier, but still worth it. And make sure that the fewer additives in the ingredients on the back, the better. Especially avoid fruits soaked in any kind of juice or syrup. It's just added processed sugar, as we talked about. And try to find companies that don't line their cans with BPA, which is a toxic plastic. Next, meet me in the middle. Though I'm not pushing you to be a vegetarian, beans and legumes like chickpeas and lentils, and soybean products like edamame, tofu, and tempeh offer a high amount of protein at a lower price point than meat. And you could argue, based on significant amounts of research, they're healthier too. Eating beans regularly can help reduce cholesterol, improve gut health, reduce the risk of heart disease, and maintain a healthy body weight. Have trouble breaking down or digesting beans? Maybe you should try lentils. They oftentimes, I find, are easier to digest. Next step, time to bulk up. Bulk purchases of staple foods offer greater financial flexibility. Purchasing staple items in bulk reduces purchase price by anywhere from 10 to 30%, offering some serious long-term savings. Next step, keep it simple. This is one that's really important. Avoid, as best you can, ultra-processed foods. What are ultra-processed foods? You can think of them as any foods you probably couldn't make with simple ingredients and simple cooking techniques in your own kitchen. If you're unsure if something's ultra-processed, look at the label to count the ingredients. Ultra-processed foods are industrial formulations with 5 or more ingredients. Even something as wholesome as a loaf of bread from the grocery is actually usually ultra-processed. But not all bread is created equal. For example, take these 2 loaves of bread you pick up in the bread aisle. Bread A on the right is labeled as simple whole wheat bread. It's small, unassuming, no oats or grains on the crust to make it look extra healthy. And bread B on the left is labeled whole grains oat nut and boasts 23 grams of whole grains versus only 13 grams of whole grains in bread A. But remember, what we talk about? Look at the serving size. We see one slice of bread A on the right is 26 grams, much smaller than one slice of bread B on the left at 43 grams. Their sugar and fiber content are actually about the same when you account for serving size. But despite being a much bigger slice, bread B has only 1 more gram of protein, despite it being a whole grains oat nut. And bread A has 80% less fat from processed soybean oil as bread B. Now, let's look at the ingredients. Starting with sugar. Bread A is made with only simple brown sugar, which you can see circled in blue. It's very simple, relatively little processing compared to other added sugars. And bread B has 3 different kinds of sugar, including juice concentrate, which, as we talked about, is very processed. Next thing I look at, what kind of flour are they using? Bread B has as the #1 ingredient an enriched wheat flour, not whole wheat. Enriching is a form of ultra processing to artificially add nutrients back into a food because processing has stripped them out. And what's in bread A? Simple, nothing fancy, just whole wheat flour. And lastly, if I'm looking at ingredients, I'm looking at additives and preservatives. They are usually towards the end of the list of ingredients. Bread B has 8 different additives not usually found in your pantry, circled in yellow, and bread A, 3. This goes again to show not all ultra-processed foods, even breads, are created equal. While bread A is just simple whole wheat bread, no extra oats or nuts or other added whole grains, in my eyes, it wins out every time. Why is this even important, you ask? Recent studies have shown that diets highest in ultra-processed foods are associated with higher rates of cancer, diabetes, and other metabolic diseases, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, even mental illness, especially when we're thinking about people with food or nutrition insecurity. It's no surprise that they have higher risk for those same diseases. So how can you eat healthy and still sometimes indulge in your guilty pleasures? I'm not saying you have to get rid of all ultra-processed food, though it would help. I can't do it myself. But think about it this way. Over the course of a day, you can reduce risks to your health by eating 5 unprocessed whole foods for every 1 ultra-processed food you eat. Still want to eat that bagel for breakfast? Balance it out with a combination of 5 vegetables, fruits, nuts, or seeds, etc. Some unprocessed, 5 unprocessed whole foods. You get the idea, eaten sometime during that day. And lastly, compare your food, not yourself. What do I mean by that? I mean, shop around. Grocery A may have the best price on fresh produce, and grocery B has the best price and selection of fresh food or canned veggies and beans, fresh seafood, excuse me, or canned veggies and beans. Think it's too expensive to shop at the farmer's market? In California, there's actually a really cool program called Double Up Food Bucks, where those of us with CalFresh food dollars can get a free match of $10 to $15 for every dollar spent to specifically buy fresh local produce from the farmer's market. So as we're talking about this, it's important to understand your own specific budget and your health. Talk to your medical provider to make choices that fit your lifestyle. All right. Wow. Lots of info. I may have gotten nervous and talked a little fast. Anyways, what are the take homes? Let's wrap it up. #1, eat multicolored whole foods that were recently alive. Keep it simple. Hydrate to support healthy digestion, of course. Limit white foods such as fluffy white bread, bagels, pasta, and potatoes. Try to combine fiber and proteins with your carbohydrate with each meal. Interestingly, there's a concept in Japan called harahachibu. Eat until you're 80% full. Take your time. Enjoy each bite of your food to recognize when you reach that point so you don't consume too many calories. And as author Michael Pollan said, eat food, meaning real food, not processed junk. Don't eat too much, and mostly plants. Thank you all for your attention, and I want to especially thank 3 people who I couldn't have done this without: the awesome team that helped me to put all these beautiful slides together, Carissa and Carlton Uko, and the wonderful Kate Weigel, who helped coach me up so I wasn't stumbling over hopefully more than 10% of my words. With that said, I'd like to open it up to questions.